It took only a single tear to bring the mighty to his knees. He had faced bullets, fire, and the weight of war, but nothing could match the sight of Caleb's trembling lips and wet lashes as he looked at him with quiet, devastating hurt. Ethan Cole had been called many things in his life: commander, leader, the last unyielding alpha in the Eastern Division. But in this moment, standing in the cold wind on the Brooklyn Bridge, he felt like nothing more than a man stripped bare, watching the one person he could never afford to lose turn away. The city roared around them, taxis honking, footsteps echoing, the distant hum of the East River, but all Ethan could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Caleb's voice was soft, almost breaking, but every syllable carried like a blade. "You promised me you wouldn't disappear again," Caleb whispered, and the words were almost drowned in the wind. "But you did, and you didn't even say why." Ethan swallowed, the metal taste of guilt rising in his mouth. His instinct was to protect, to shield, to bury the truth so deep it could never hurt Caleb. But Caleb's eyes searched him, demanding the truth, demanding something Ethan had never been good at giving: vulnerability. Caleb was young, too young to have been dragged into the shadows Ethan lived in. Yet there he was, standing against the skyline with a courage that tore Ethan apart. "You think walking away keeps me safe," Caleb said, his breath shuddering. "But all it does is leave me alone." Ethan stepped forward, the space between them now just one shallow breath. The scent of Caleb, warm, familiar, home, wrapped around him like a plea. "I left because I had to," he said, voice low, trembling in a way that would have shocked his men. "Not because I wanted to." Caleb laughed bitterly, the sound sharp. "And I'm supposed to believe that? You vanish for months. No word, no explanation, and now you show up like nothing happened." "I came back for you," Ethan said, the truth cutting through him as much as it cut through Caleb. But Caleb shook his head, blinking hard, those tears finally slipping free. "You came back when it was convenient for you, Ethan. Not when I needed you." That was the moment. The moment Ethan felt something inside him fracture the battle-hardened walls, the disciplined composure, the alpha who could stare down death without blinking. It all crumbled at the sight of Caleb's tears. His knees gave way before his mind could stop him, and suddenly he was looking up at the Omega, his voice breaking. "Please," Ethan whispered, "don't give up on me yet." Caleb froze, the cold air burning in his lungs. He had never seen Ethan like this, stripped of power, stripped of certainty. And in that rawness, there was a flicker of truth. The truth was, Ethan hadn't been running from Caleb. He had been running from the world that wanted to destroy them both. But the world was closing in again. Caleb's breath trembled as he tried to pull back, but Ethan's hand found his wrist, gentle, not restraining, just there, grounding. "Why now?" Caleb asked, voice raw. "Why not before, when I needed you the most?" Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "Because before I didn't think I'd survive long enough to keep you." The confession hit Caleb like a wave. It was more than an apology, it was an admission that Ethan had been living on the edge, maybe too close to never coming back. Caleb's chest ached with anger and relief all tangled together. "You're an idiot," Caleb whispered. "I know," Ethan said, and a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. For a moment, the world narrowed to just them, the air thick with everything unsaid. But reality was cruel. The sound of approaching sirens broke their fragile silence. Caleb looked over Ethan's shoulder, frowning. "You're still in trouble, aren't you?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "The kind of trouble that doesn't go away unless I end it myself." Caleb stepped closer, their foreheads almost touching. "Then let me help." Ethan shook his head instantly. "I can't drag you into this war." Caleb's hands slid to the back of Ethan's neck, fingers warm against cold skin. "Ethan, you don't get to decide that anymore. You're not the only one willing to fight for us." It was the first time in months Ethan felt something like hope. But hope was dangerous, it made you reckless. And recklessness could get Caleb hurt. The sirens grew louder, flashing blue and red against the steel of the bridge. Ethan knew he had seconds to decide. Run and protect Caleb from the fallout, or stay and finally face everything with him. He chose to stay. 2 nights later, in a quiet motel on the edge of the city, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed while Caleb tended to the deep cut on his arm. The tension between them had shifted, still sharp, but warmer, laced with unspoken trust. "You didn't have to stay," Caleb said softly, dabbing the wound with a cloth. "I didn't have a choice," Ethan replied, watching Caleb's careful hands. "You're the only thing worth coming back for." Caleb's cheeks flushed, but he didn't look away. "You think sweet words are going to erase the months you were gone?" "No," Ethan said simply, "but I'll spend the rest of my life proving them true." Caleb froze, the weight of those words settling in his chest. Ethan didn't make promises lightly. In fact, he rarely made them at all. And this one sounded like a vow carved into stone. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window. Caleb set the cloth down and looked at him. "Then start proving it. Stay with me. No more running." Ethan reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. "No more running," he promised. Months passed. The danger didn't vanish overnight. The threats against Ethan still lingered in the shadows. But this time he didn't face them alone. Caleb stood at his side, not just as someone he loved, but as someone who understood the weight of his battles. There were nights when Ethan woke in a cold sweat, haunted by memories of the war and the people he couldn't save. And every time, Caleb was there, warm, steady, a quiet anchor in the storm. And there were days when Caleb doubted, when fear crept in like frost. But Ethan's presence, solid and unwavering, reminded him that they had already survived the worst. One evening, standing on the rooftop of their small apartment, they watched the city lights shimmer like 1,000 tiny stars. Ethan wrapped his arms around Caleb from behind, resting his chin on his shoulder. "You know," Caleb murmured, "when you first showed up again, I thought I'd never forgive you." Ethan smiled against his skin. "And now," Caleb turned his head slightly, meeting Ethan's eyes, "now I can't imagine my life without you." For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly unyielding again, not because of his strength, but because of the quiet, steady love they had built. The Alpha who had once stood alone had found his reason to kneel, and the Omega who had once cried alone had found someone who would never let him go. The city stretched out before them, vast and endless. But in that moment, the world felt small enough to hold in the space between their joined hands. And for once, they both believed in forever. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.